Game of Thrones, Slayer System, killing my way to top ch01 to 10. Synopsis. The executioner's blade was falling, but his rise was just beginning. Lynn wakes up to find himself transported to the continent of Westeros. But it's a nightmare start. He's already being forced onto the chopping block by none other than Lord Eddard Stark, moments away from losing his head. Just in the nick of time, Lynn awakens the Slayer system. Enemy killed, 1 experience plus 1. Allocate Experience. Horsemanship 9/10 rightward arrow 10/10. Level up. Horsemanship, Proficient, 0/100. Chapter 1, Chapter 1, starting with the chop. The winter wind whipped up bits of snow, tearing across the gray skies of the north. The air was thick with that dry, snowy chill. Lynn's cheek was smashed against a rough wooden stump covered in moss. That icy feel sank right into his bones. A sharp cold stabbed at the back of his neck. It was like a venomous snake hissing right against his skin. In the corner of his eye, he could see legs wrapped in heavy leather and fur, standing silently in a circle around him. Heavy breaths rose and fell in his ears, mixed with the faint clink of chainmail rubbing together. A deep, stern voice cut through, cold as stone and without a hint of feeling. Each word hit Lynn like a heavy rock crashing down on his chest. In the name of Robert of House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. Lynn's eyes narrowed sharp. That voice, those words. He struggled to lift his head. But 2 strong hands clamped down on his shoulders, pinning him flat to the execution block. I, Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, hereby sentence you. Ned Stark. A mess of memory fragments flooded in like a bursting dam, overwhelming Lynn's mind. Wasn't he supposed to be getting cozy with his junior apprentice back home? How the hell? A chunk of memory that wasn't his own surged up. Black robes, the freezing wall. And, beyond the wall, those eyes burning with blue fire. He'd become a deserter from the Night's Watch. To death. Ned Stark's words dropped like a final nail in the coffin. Lynn felt the grip on him loosen. He heard the massive scrape of metal being drawn. It was a long, clear sound, full of finality like it could cut through anything. This Valyrian steel greatsword, called Ice, was enchanted with spells and runes. It was wider than a hand, taller than Robb when standing. Dark as smoke. Normal weapons couldn't kill the others, but Valyrian steel could. It was priceless. But the way to forge it was long lost. The existing Valyrian steel weapons were all held by families, each with its own history. 1. Lynn's heart pounded like crazy in his chest, nearly busting through his ribs. No. I can't just die like this. As ice rose high, a cold, mechanical voice exploded in Lynn's head. Detecting host's strong will to survive. Enemy Slayer system activated. Newbie gift pack, includes one-time newbie protection. Host, Lynn. Strength, 3, weak. Agility, 4, weak. Constitution, 2, weak. Reference, average healthy adult male has 3 in all stats. Skills, none. Experience, 0. Experience note, killing enemies grants XP based on their strength, minimum 1 for a regular human. XP can level up skill proficiency. 2. Attribute note, can be boosted through training, blessed items, and more. Training caps at 10 points max, other methods have no limit. Attributes double absolute power ignore weight, it's pure max output. Like, a normal guy with 3 strength can deadlift about 265 pounds, at 6 strength, that's 530 pounds. 1. Lynn's mind blanked out for a second. A system. But those crappy stats snuffed out the spark of hope he just felt. With this weak-ass body? Forget fighting back, he could barely crawl off the block. He could feel that legendary Valyrian greatsword ice already swinging down toward his neck. Even Ned couldn't swing this beast of a sword easily. No time to think. Lynn mustered every bit of strength and roared from his parched throat. The old gods gave me a vision. Lynn's voice was hoarse and piercing, shattering the heavy silence of the execution ground. Everyone froze. The falling greatsword veered off, slamming down next to Lynn's head. The whoosh of the blade scraped his skin, raising goosebumps. He swallowed hard. Lynn could even smell the cold tang of Valyrian steel on the sword. Damn, that was close. Ned almost took his head off. Good thing Ned twisted it aside in time. Bullshit. A young, cocky voice piped up, dripping with mockery. Saying anything to save your skin, huh? Lynn didn't need to look to know it was Theon Greyjoy, the Iron Island's only intact heir. Well, for now, anyway. 1. Ned Stark didn't say a word. He just stood there, still as a statue. Sword in hand, his figure loomed under the dim sky like a silent carving. But that paused sword was Lynn's shot. Lynn forced himself to chill out, his brain racing faster than ever. Ned Stark. A guy who valued honor and duty more than life itself. He stuck to the old ways. Stark still had the blood of the first men in their veins. He believed the one passing sentence had to swing the sword himself. Taking a life? You gotta look 'em in the eye, hear their last words. If you can't do that, maybe they don't deserve to die. He's as fair as they come. Lie to him, and you're done. Beg for mercy? Dream on. The only way out, pit his duty against his traditions. My lord. Lynn's voice steadied, no more yelling. He made sure every word came out clear. I'm a deserter. I broke my oath. By law, I should lose my head. That line stunned the crowd again. Theon's face twisted in confusion. Nobody expected a guy fighting for his life to own up to his crime. A faint ripple crossed Ned Stark's deep gray eyes, hard to spot. But I didn't run 'cause I'm a coward. It was a vision from the old gods. Lynn spoke slow but strong. I did all this to get the message back safe. 1. Lynn twisted his head, straining to look up at the tall figure. The old gods showed me. Beyond the wall, something's waking up. They ride dead horses, eyes like burning sapphires, and everywhere they go, everything freezes solid. The others, they're not just stories, my lord. They're real. Lynn didn't paint the full picture. He just pulled the deepest fear from the original owner's memories, laid it out plain. That bone-deep cold. That suffocating silence. That ancient evil you can't even describe. The execution ground went dead quiet. Just the wind howling past everyone's ears. Behind Ned Stark, Robb Stark's young face was all shock and worry. His hand gripped his sword hilt without thinking. My lord, he's just spouting nonsense. How could the old gods guide him? Theon tried to snap the weird vibe. Ned Stark stayed quiet. He stared into Lynn's eyes. No liar's slyness there, just the terror of a survivor, and this rock-solid certainty. Lynn knew this was the make-or-break moment. He met Ned Stark's gaze and said, word by word. I can see the future. Not just the others, I see other stuff happening too. Killing me's easy, my lord. One swing of that great sword in your hand. But you'd be chopping down a warning about the long night coming. You're the warden of the north. Your duty's to protect the north, keep the Seven Kingdoms safe from wildlings and those dead things. A deserter's life versus the safety of the whole north, which one's worth more? That's for you to decide, my lord. If you don't believe me, I can give you a prophecy right now. Lynn finished and locked eyes with Ned Stark. Time stretched out like taffy. Every second was agony. Lynn could hear his heart thumping like a drum. After what felt like forever. What did you see? Lynn heard Ned ask, and he jumped right in. On the way back, you'll find a dead dire wolf. If you don't run into a dire wolf, you can chop my head off right there, no complaints. The sound of metal sliding back into its sheath rang out, and Lynn felt a wave of relief. Take him back. Ned Stark's voice was still low, but edged with unavoidable weariness. Keep him under close watch. 2 guards stepped up quick, yanking Lynn roughly off the ground. The exhaustion of surviving hit him like a truck. Lynn's legs buckled, barely holding him up. He got dragged through the crowd, stumbling. Before they hauled him away, he glanced back. Ned Stark was watching him. Those gray eyes were a mix of emotions hard to read. Scrutiny, doubt. But Lynn knew he was safe for now. He'd snatched a sliver of life from under the Warden of the North's sword. Lynn knelt on the ground, shaking non-stop. From the cold, and from the aftershocks. In his vision, that blue panel only he could see hung there quietly. Lynn's mouth twitched up into a grin he couldn't hold back. Chapter 2, Dire Wolf. The winter winds showed no sign of letting up. Lynn was flanked by 2 guards, one on each side, dragging him along. He trudged unevenly over the snow-covered ground. The cold bite of the chain seeped from his wrists, spreading up his arms and through his whole body. Every breath sucked in air sharp as knives, stinging his lungs raw. Lynn's body was in rough shape. The original guy, a Night's Watch deserter, had fled south from the wall and was already at the end of his rope. Hunger and cold had drained every last bit of strength. That outburst back at the execution ground had used up pretty much all the energy Lynn had left. Now, he could only let himself be hauled forward. At the front of the group was Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell. He rode a tall warhorse, his broad back steady as a mountain. That Valyrian greatsword called Ice was sheathed again, slung across his back. But the invisible weight of it still hung over the whole party. His sons trailed behind him. The oldest, Robb, rode side by side with Jon Snow. They were whispering about something, looking serious. Theon Greyjoy seemed way more relaxed, even messing around with his horse a bit. The youngest, Bran Stark, was told by his dad to ride close by his side. His young face still had a touch of paleness. Lynn's eyes scanned over those young figures before dropping back to the monotonous snow in front of him. He knew damn well he was only alive for the moment. Ned Stark wasn't an idiot. A story about the others would buy him, at best, a chance to be questioned. If he couldn't cough up more useful info, or if they called bullshit. That Valyrian greatsword Ice would be back at his neck in no time. And this time, no lucky breaks. Bran. Ned Stark's deep voice cut through the wind, clear in Bran's ears. Ned didn't turn around, just slowed his horse so his son's mount could keep up easier. You understand why I brought you today? Bran's little hands gripped the reins tight. He looked up at his father's profile. Jon said I'm old enough to watch an execution. It's more than that. Ned Stark's tone had a teaching edge to it. You know why I had to execute him? Because he's a deserter from the Night's Watch. Bran answered quick. Yes. Lord Ned nodded slightly. But he's a man too. Our laws are ancient, deserters must die. 1. I never enjoy it, Bran. But my duty doesn't let me back down. Ned's gaze drifted to the distant grey-white horizon. He who passes the sentence should swing the sword. If you're going to take a life, you owe it to look him in the eyes and hear his final words. If you can't do that, maybe he doesn't deserve to die. He wasn't just saying this for Bran, it was for every Stark kid behind him. Bran, remember, one day you'll be Robb's bannerman. You'll rule your own lands for your brother and the king, and upholding the law will be part of it. Then, you can't kill for fun, and you can't run from responsibility. Face it, never shy away. Or you'll lose your respect for life real quick. This was the Stark way. The North's way. Lynn listened quietly. He knew this conversation. It was Ned Stark schooling his kids on honor and duty. 1. A man so noble he was almost stubborn about it? But that's exactly why Lynn had bet on him and won. Bran went quiet for a bit, like he was chewing on his dad's words. But his young mind clearly couldn't wrap around the heavy stuff yet. He was more hung up on something else. Father. Bran's voice had that kid curiosity, mixed with a fear he couldn't hide. What the deserter said, is it true? The others, do they really exist? As soon as he asked, the group's vibe shifted a little. Robb and Jon stopped talking and glanced over. Even Theon Greyjoy toned down his cockiness. Everyone's eyes, one way or another, landed on the prisoner being escorted at the back. Lynn kept his head down, like he didn't notice. Eddard Stark didn't answer for a long time. The wind and snow whipped his cloak, flapping loud. A long time ago, in the Age of Heroes, the long night came. He finally spoke, his voice distant and grave. The first men fought alongside the children of the forest to drive those things back to the lands of always winter in the far north. Brandon the Builder raised the wall, and the Night's Watch was formed to guard against their return. These are stories written in the history books. Bran's eyes lit up for a second, then dimmed. So, they're just stories, right? 1. Eddard Stark went silent. He couldn't give a straight answer. As Warden of the North, he knew the weight of those old legends better than anyone. The North wasn't like the warm South. Here, folks revered the old gods and believed in magic. 1. We haven't seen the others for thousands of years. That's what Ned said in the end. It was vague, neither yes nor no. But the seriousness in it made Bran's young heart uneasy. Right then, Jon Snow at the front suddenly reined in his horse. My lord. His voice had a note of surprise. The whole group halted. Lynn got shoved to a stop by the guards. He lifted his head, following Jon's gaze ahead. Not far off in the snow, there was a huge black shape lying there. It was the body of a beast. Its size was way bigger than a regular wolf, almost as big as a pony. 1. Deep gray fur crusted with frozen black blood, and a broken antler stabbed deep into its throat. A killing blow. We really found a dire wolf. Robb Stark's voice was full of awe. Ned whipped his head back to look at Lynn. He quickly dismounted and went up to check the wolf's body. Chapter 3, Stag, Wolf, Lion. It really is a dire wolf. Everyone was stunned by the sight before them. A dire wolf. The sigil of House Stark. A creature of legend said to live only north of the wall. They hadn't been seen south of the wall for over 200 years. For one to appear here now was not a good omen. Most critically, the deserter had actually predicted it. Theon Greyjoy whistled, dismounted, and approached cautiously. It's huge. He kicked the stiff corpse with his boot. It's a monster. It's not a monster, Jon Snow retorted, dismounting as well and crouching down to examine it closely. It's a mother. Look. He pushed aside the matted fur beneath the mother wolf. Several furry little creatures were huddled together, nestled against their mother's cold body, emitting faint whimpers. They were alive. Bran's eyes lit up instantly. Look. Father. He jumped off his horse and stumbled over. The pups hadn't opened their eyes yet, their bodies were only the size of small dogs. Instinctively, they burrowed toward warmth. Bran carefully picked one up and held it to his face. The little creature was entirely black, save for its wet nose. Kill them, Theon Greyjoy's voice rang out coldly. They won't survive without a mother. Eddard Stark frowned, looking at the fragile lives with a complicated expression. Born of the dead. Theon is right, Ned said gravely. It's a mercy. No. Bran cried out immediately. Robb hurried to speak as well. Father, please. A dire wolf dead in the south, an abrupt voice interjected. The voice wasn't loud, but it halted everyone's movements. They turned toward the source. The speaker was the captured deserter, Lynn. He stood there, shackles still on his wrists, his face bloodlessly pale. But Lynn's eyes were unusually bright. Ned Stark turned, his gray eyes locking onto him. The gaze felt almost tangible, carrying scrutiny and authority. Lynn did not retreat. Meeting Ned's gaze, he continued calmly. "My lord. The dire wolf is the sigil of House Stark. A mother wolf, dead on the road, her throat pierced by a stag's antler. Yet on her body are marks of being torn by a mountain lion." Lynn spoke unhurriedly. The smile on Theon Greyjoy's face froze. He instinctively retorted, "How could there be mountain lions in the north? Mountain lions only exist in the warm south. The stag, the sigil of House Baratheon, a crowned stag. The lion, the sigil of House Lannister. The wolf represented the Starks. A wolf's throat pierced by a broken antler. It pointed to the troubles left behind after King Robert's death. Robert's children were not his own, it also pointed to Littlefinger's dagger that caused the chaos. And Ned was that wolf. Ned would die shortly after discovering the truth hidden in the words, 'The seed is strong.' There are 6 pups here." Lynn's gaze swept over the whimpering wolf pups. 4 males and 2 females. Exactly corresponding to Lord Stark's 6 children. Looking at the 5 dire wolf pups on the ground, Theon wanted to argue. There are clearly 5. But Ned's cold expression made him swallow his words. The wind howled, whipping up loose snow and striking their faces. This was no longer a coincidence. This was an omen. An ominous sign from the old gods. "What exactly are you trying to say?" Eddard Stark's voice was colder than the northern wind. If the pups corresponded to his children, did the dead dire wolf correspond to him? "Winter is coming." 2. Lynn enunciated each of the 4 words clearly. 2. Spoken by an outsider, the Stark words carried an eerie sense of destiny. "This is not a gift, my lord. This is a warning. Something beyond the wall has awakened, and the old gods have sent a warning. They belong to the Stark children. They will protect them." Having said his piece, Lynn fell silent and lowered his head again. He had said enough. Any more would not be a warning, but a curse. He didn't want to lose his head. Eddard Stark stood silently. He looked at the dead mother wolf, the fatal antler, and the 5 pups. Unshackle him. Although Ned still harbored suspicions about Lynn, his attitude had improved significantly. Then, Ned's gaze fell on his youngest son, Bran. Bran was hugging the pup tightly, looking at him pleadingly. After a long time. "You will raise them yourselves," Eddard Stark finally said. "You will feed them yourselves, train them yourselves. If they die, you will bury them yourselves. Do not ask others to do it for you." Joy instantly bloomed on the children's faces. "There's another one." Jon Snow's surprised voice rang out. From a nearby snowdrift, he pulled out another pup. It had been pushed away by its siblings and was lying alone in the snow. This pup was entirely white, with red eyes. It lay quietly, not whimpering like the others. The runt of the litter. Ned recalled Lynn's words. He had found it strange when Lynn mentioned 6 pups, as only 5 were visible. But there really were 6. This made Ned start to believe that Lynn could see things others could not. Could he truly prophesy? Theon interrupted Ned's thoughts with a whistle. "Matches you perfectly, Snow." Jon ignored Theon and simply picked it up. The little dire wolf curled up quietly in Jon's arms, making no noise. That deserter was right, there really are 6. "So this one is yours, Jon," Robb said to his bastard brother with a smile. Robb and Jon had a good relationship. With reddish-brown hair and a sturdy build, Robb was 14. As Eddard Stark's son, he inherited his father's character. Honorable, loyal, and just. A rare smile appeared on Jon Snow's face. The direwolf incident thus concluded. The guards escorted Lynn back into the formation. No one looked at him again. As if his shocking remarks were merely whispers in the wind. But Lynn knew everything had changed. Even with his head lowered, he could feel the gaze of the Lord of Winterfell lingering on his face for a long time. Suspicion remained in that gaze. But more than that, there was vigilance. Robb and the others were too young to understand the implications of the stag, lion, and wolf. But Ned understood perfectly. Back at Winterfell, Lynn was not sent to the gallows, nor thrown into a dungeon. He was confined in a room at the base of a tower. The room wasn't large, just a hard plank bed, a table, and a small window letting in a cold draft. Winterfell, built atop hot springs, had an excellent independent heating system. It wasn't as cold as he imagined, compared to the days of sleeping in the wind as a Night's Watch deserter. This was practically heaven. A guard brought a simple meal. Black bread, roast meat, and a cup of steaming organ stew. Lynn wolfed down the food, finally bringing a sliver of warmth to his frozen stomach. The weakness in his body receded slightly. He walked to a bronze mirror. His appearance was still his own, his name still his name. It seemed his transmigration had altered the inherent perception of everyone around him, making everything appear reasonable. Perhaps this was the power of the system. This also made Lynn feel a bit better. At least he wasn't the ugly brute who got beheaded at the beginning of the show. How would he find women looking like that? He'd probably be despised to death. 4. From the window, he looked out through the narrow stone slit. He could see a corner of the castle courtyard. Guards were patrolling, servants were busy. Everything seemed orderly. But Lynn knew that beneath this calm, a massive storm was brewing. He had forcibly bound his fate to the fate of this family in a nearly insane manner. 1. The blue panel visible only to him floated into view again. His gaze landed on the glaring experience, 0. Enemy killing system. To gain experience, he had to kill enemies. But now he was an unarmed prisoner, locked in the most fortified castle in the north. Who could he kill? Lynn's brows knit tightly together. He had to increase his strength as quickly as possible. In this world where lives were as cheap as grass, power was the only thing he could rely on. Chapter 4, Lynn's Prophecy. The room reeked of mold and wet stone. The only window was set high up. It was just a narrow slit, casting a pale, feeble shaft of daylight. Lynn leaned against the corner, every muscle in his body protesting. The weakness woven from hunger and cold clung to him like a festering wound, refusing to leave. Lynn had gambled on Ned Stark's honor and won. He had bought himself some time using the omens of the old gods. But this was only a temporary reprieve. One lie required countless others to cover it. A prophecy required an even more shocking prophecy to prove it. 2. He was now like an acrobat on a tightrope, a bottomless abyss beneath his feet. Any misstep would shatter him to pieces. He had to increase his value quickly, making Ned Stark feel that killing him would be a loss. 1. An immeasurable loss. Lynn's mind raced, piecing together fragments of his past life's knowledge about this world. The warning about the White Walkers was just the beginning. The omen of the dire wolf was the second step. Next, he needed to drop a real bombshell, news heavy enough to shake the entire North, perhaps even the Seven Kingdoms. A tragedy that was about to happen and could not be stopped. The current king, Robert Baratheon, and Ned Stark were sent to the Vales Eyre as children to be fostered by the Lord of the Eyre, Jon Arryn. Ned arrived 8 years later than Robert. The two brothers spent 7 years together. This forged a deep bond between Ned and Robert. Ned's sister, Lyanna, was betrothed to Robert, further cementing their ties. Their foster father, Lord Jon Arryn, was then the Lord of the Vale. Old Jon Arryn was in his 40s at the time and had no children, so he treated Ned and Robert like his own sons. When the Mad King's son, Rhaegar, took Lyanna, Robert's betrothed, and then killed Ned's father and brother, he demanded that Jon Arryn hand over Robert and Ned. These two young men were threats to House Targaryen. Jon Arryn naturally refused and called his banners, sparking Robert's rebellion. It could be said that Jon Arryn was the benefactor of both Robert and Ned. Lynn's hope now rested entirely on Jon Arryn. Heavy footsteps sounded outside the door, interrupting Lynn's thoughts. Creak. The heavy wooden door was pushed open. It wasn't a guard who walked in, but an old man in grey maestus robes. Around his neck hung a chain forged from different metals, each link representing a field of study he had mastered. Maester Lewin, the brain of Winterfell. He was also one of Ned Stark's most trusted advisors. Maester Lewin's gaze was calm and sharp, carrying a scholar's prudence. He didn't speak immediately, just quietly observed Lynn. From his pale face to his tattered black clothes, to those eyes that remained bright even in the dim light. They say you prophesied the appearance of the dire wolf. Maester Lewin's voice was gentle, betraying no emotion. I made no prophecy. 1. Lynn's voice was somewhat hoarse. I merely interpreted the warning of the old gods. Old gods. Maester Lewin chewed on the word, his grey eyebrows raising slightly. You claim to have seen White Walkers, and now you mention the old gods. Young man, do you know what you are saying? I do. Lynn met his gaze without flinching. I know that winter is coming. Maester Lewin fell silent. He walked to the only table in the room and set down the items he had brought. A piece of bread, a bowl of hot soup, and a small cup of medicine. Lord Stark asked me to check on your health. Maester Lewin's tone remained flat. And to hear what else you might interpret. Lynn didn't move. He knew that Maester Lewin's real interrogation was just beginning. Maester Lewin represented Ned Stark's reason and skepticism. Maester, do you believe in the existence of White Walkers? Lynn asked in return. I believe in the records of history. Maester Lewin's answer was watertight. History says they were driven back thousands of years ago. Lynn shook his head. History also says dire wolves haven't appeared south of the wall for 200 years. Lynn's words made Maester Lewin pause. Lynn continued. A mother wolf, dead on the road, throat pierced by a stag's antler, marks of a lion's claws on her body. The stag is Baratheon, the lion is Lannister, the wolf is Stark. This is no coincidence, Maester. This is the coming storm. Maester Lewin turned around, looking deeply at Lynn. You seem well versed in southern heraldry. A Night's Watch deserter shouldn't know these things. Lynn's heart skipped a beat. It was a trap. He was acting too unlike an ordinary brother of the Night's Watch. I wasn't born a man of the Night's Watch. Lynn lowered his eyelids, his tone dropping. Before I donned the black, I had a family, read a few books. 1. The explanation was weak, but it was the only one he had. Maester Lewin didn't press further. He simply pushed the cup of medicine toward Lynn. Drink it. It will do you good. Lynn looked at the cloudy liquid but didn't move. Maester. His voice dropped lower, carrying a deliberately crafted sense of mystery and unease. The warning of the old gods is not limited to the north. Maester Lewin's brows furrowed. What do you mean? The center of the storm is not Winterfell, but King's Landing. Lynn looked up, staring fixedly at Maester Lewin. No matter how high the falcon flies, it cannot escape fate's hunt. Maester Lewin's pupils contracted sharply. Falcon. House Arryn of the Eyrie. Jon Arryn. Hand of the King. Warden of the East. Foster father to both Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. Throughout the Seven Kingdoms, he was the symbol of stability and order. What exactly are you trying to say? For the first time, a nearly imperceptible tremor entered Maester Lewin's voice. Lynn knew he had captured the man's full attention. He leaned in closer, speaking word by word in a voice only the two of them could hear. The hand of the king, Lord Jonarin, is already dead. The news just hasn't arrived yet. He didn't die of illness, nor of old age. He was murdered. Boom. The sentence was like a thunderclap in Maester Lewin's mind. His face instantly turned ashen. He subconsciously took a step back, bumping into the table behind him with a loud clatter. Nonsense. Maester Lewin lost his gentle demeanor, shouting sternly. But the horror in his voice could not be concealed. Do you know what you are accusing? This is treason. I am accusing no one. Lynn leaned back against the wall. His body trembled slightly from weakness. But his gaze remained firm. I am merely conveying the warning I saw. Soon, a raven from King's Landing will bear witness for me. The king will ride north to invite Lord Ned south to take Lord Jonarin's place. And that is the beginning of all tragedy. Lynn paused, staring dead at Maester Lewin. If not handled properly, Lord Ned will also die in King's Landing. 1. The room fell into a deathly silence. Only the sound of Maester Lewin's heavy breathing remained. He looked at Lynn as if looking at a demon crawled out of hell. Every word this deserter spoke struck precisely on the most sensitive nerves of Westeros. From the White Walkers in the north to the conspiracies in King's Landing. All of this went far beyond the scope of lies a deserter could fabricate. It wasn't a lie. It was a prophecy. A prophecy terrifying enough to suffocate. After a long time, Maester Lewin finally found his voice. Who else have you told this to? Only you, Maester. Lynn replied respectfully. Remember, do not tell anyone else. Maester Lewin took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He picked up the bread and soup from the table and shoved them back into Lynn's hands. This time, his actions were no longer indifferent but carried a force that allowed no refusal. Eat this. Live. Until the raven arrives, you must live. With that, Maester Lewin didn't look at Lynn again, turning and striding quickly out of the room. The heavy wooden door closed once more. The sound of the lock clicking echoed in the empty corridor. Lynn leaned back against the wall and let out a long breath. Cold sweat had soaked his back. He knew he had just walked along the cliff's edge again. But he had won the gamble. He had thoroughly entangled his fate with Jonarin's death, with Ned's journey south, with these muddy waters. Lynn picked up the now lukewarm soup and drank it in large gulps. Warmth flowed into his stomach, dispelling some of the chill. He had to survive. He had to get stronger quickly. Lynn's gaze fell once again on the panel only he could see. Experience, 0. Now, he needed to gain Ned's trust. Only then could he regain his freedom. Instead of being locked in this small room, unable to do anything. Chapter 5, Prophecy of the Old Gods. Maester Lewin's footsteps echoed in the empty stone corridor. They were much faster than usual. The Maester's chain, the metal links representing knowledge and reason, clinked with a frantic, broken rhythm as he walked. He had just come from the cell at the base of the tower. The young deserter's words clung to his mind like ghostly whispers, refusing to fade. The hand of the king, Lord Jonarin, is dead. He was murdered. Soon, a raven from King's Landing will bear witness for me. This wasn't the raving of a madman. Those eyes, that certain tone, the terrifying logic connecting every clue. 1. The omen of the dire wolf came first. The conspiracy in King's Landing followed. Maester Lewin felt a chill that penetrated his very lungs. A chill colder than the snows of the northern winter. He had to tell Lord Eddard immediately. He crossed the courtyard, the cold wind whipping his grey maester's robes. Guards nodded in greeting, but he had no mind to respond. He had only one destination. The God's Wood. Passing through the low ironwood gate, the noise of the outside world was instantly cut off. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves rushed to greet him. This was the oldest part of Winterfell. The foundation of the faith in the old gods. Eddard Stark stood beneath the heart tree. The massive weirwood's bark was pale as bone, its blood-red leaves rustling in the breeze. The grotesque face carved into the trunk wept red sap, like eyes watching eternally. Ned did not turn around. He was quietly cleaning the Valyrian steel greatsword, ice. In the dim light, the blade rippled with a dull sheen. Maester. Ned's voice was low, blending with the silence of the god's wood. How is the deserter? Maester Lewin walked to his side and stopped. He could hear the faint sound of water flowing over rocks in the hot spring pool nearby. He is weak, but his life is not in danger. Maester Lewin's voice was dry. My lord, he. Lewin paused, seeming to weigh his words. He said something else. Ned stopped cleaning the sword. He placed the soft cloth on a nearby stone and turned. His grey eyes looked at Maester Lewin. Those eyes held the calm and chill of the northern sky. What did he say? Maester Lewin took a deep breath. The cold air of the god's wood pierced his lungs, calming his chaotic thoughts slightly. He said the center of the storm is not in the north, but in King's Landing. Ned's brow furrowed slightly. Lewin's voice dropped lower. Every word seemed unusually heavy. He said, the hand of the king, Lord Jonaran, is no longer among the living. The air seemed to freeze in that moment. Only the red leaves of the heart tree continued to rustle. Ned's expression did not change. He remained like a silent statue. But Lewin could feel the atmosphere around him shift. It was the oppressive feeling of a coming storm. He also said. Lewin continued with difficulty. Lord Arryn did not die of illness, nor of old age. It was murder. The word murder was like a stone thrown into a still pond. Ned's pupils contracted sharply. Jonaran. The man who was like a father to him. The warden of the East who taught him honor and duty. The current hand of the king. Murdered. How was that possible? Robert could live freely, drinking, whoring, and ignoring state affairs, all because Jonaran, the hand, was holding everything together. He also said the king will soon come north. Maester Lewin almost held his breath as he spoke the last, most crucial sentence. To invite you south, to take the place of the hand of the king. And, if you are not careful, my lord, you will meet the same fate. Dead silence. The god's wood fell into utter silence. Eddard Stark said nothing. He simply turned back to the heart tree weeping tears of blood. His hand unconsciously rested on the hilt of his sword. A deserter of the Night's Watch. After a long time, Ned's voice sounded again, terribly hoarse. How does he know these things? 1. He said it was a warning from the old gods, Maester Lewin replied. The old gods. Ned chewed on the words. As a Northman, he knew the weight of the old gods better than anyone. Not statues of the seven in southern septs. They were the whispers in the wind, the leaves in the forest, the flowing streams. They were an ancient faith carved into the blood of every Northman. The faith of the children of the forest and the first men. The first men arrived in Westeros 12,000 years ago. To resist the first men, the children of the forest used ice magic to create the uncontrollable Night King. Thus, the first men and the children fought, then made peace, united against the White Walkers, and subsequently followed the children in worshipping the old gods. 6,000 years later, the Undals arrived in Westeros. They defeated the first men and the children of the forest, driving them north, while they occupied the south. They worshipped the faith of the seven, one god with seven aspects, hence called the seven, or the new gods. Everyone in the south worshipped the seven, while everyone in the north worshipped the old gods. When it concerned faith, even if Ned was skeptical, he had to reserve judgment for now. The dire wolf too. Maester Lewin added. Antler piercing the mother wolf's throat, lion claw marks on her body. Baratheon, Lannister, Stark. It's all too coincidental, my lord. Ned closed his eyes. In his mind, the stubborn look of the young man on the execution block surfaced. That young man had bound his life tightly to the safety of the North and the fate of the Starks. He wasn't begging for mercy. He was giving a warning. He wants to live. Ned's voice remained cold. Fabricating a sensational story to trade for his life. Perhaps, Maester Lewin didn't argue. But if this story is true, we cannot bear the consequences. Ned slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the sad face of the heart tree. Were the old gods truly warning him through the mouth of a deserter? Or was this just the beginning of a larger conspiracy? Have him watched. Ned finally gave the order. Give him food and water. Ensure he lives. Ned thought for a moment, then added. Do not keep him confined anymore. Let him out for some air. Yes, my lord, Maester Lewin bowed. We wait. Ned's voice held a weariness that couldn't be dispelled. Wait for the raven from King's Landing. If he is wrong, Ice will correct the mistake. If he is right. Ned didn't continue. But the weight of the unspoken words made Maester Lewin's heart sink. If he was right. Then winter was coming. A winter that would engulf the entire Seven Kingdoms was coming. Maester Lewin left. In the Godswood, only Eddard Stark remained. He reached out, gently touching the pale bark of the heart tree. The cold touch brought a sliver of calm to his chaotic thoughts. Father. He murmured softly. Brother. Guide me. The wind blew, red leaves swaying as if in silent response. In the tower room. Lynn leaned against the cold stone wall, listening to his steady heartbeat. He knew Maester Lewin would relay his words verbatim to Eddard Stark. He also knew what choice Eddard Stark would make. Waiting. This was the most precious thing he had won for himself. The warmth from the soup and bread was repairing his ravaged body. Strength was slowly returning to his limbs. In Lynn's vision, the blue panel still hovered. Host, Lynn. Strength, 4, weakened. Agility, 5, normal. Constitution, 4, weakened. Skills, none. Experience, 0. After resting, Lynn's condition had recovered significantly. He estimated he'd make a full recovery by tomorrow. Lynn gazed through the narrow slit of the window at the gray sky outside. By this time, Jonaran was long dead. Now he was waiting for the raven from King's Landing. Hurry up and arrive. Chapter 6, Clearing the Bandits. Early the next morning. The sound of the wooden door opening came with a harsh, rusty grinding noise. A shaft of gray light stabbed into the room, chasing away the stagnant gloom. Lynn squinted, his eyes adjusting to the brightness he hadn't seen in days. Come out. The guard's voice was devoid of emotion, simply carrying out orders. Lynn wasn't dragged back to the chopping block, nor was he thrown into a deeper dungeon. Instead, he was taken to the castle courtyard. The biting air filled his lungs, carrying the ringing of iron on iron and the faint, charred scent of roasting meat from the kitchens. This vivid, living atmosphere gave him the illusion of being in a different lifetime. Lynn's body was recovering. The energy from the hot soup and bread was slowly repairing the shell that had been hollowed out by hunger and cold. Two guards stood behind him like statues, neither too close nor too far. It was both supervision and a silent warning. Lynn's movement was restricted to this small corner of the courtyard. His gaze swept over the surroundings. Nearby, the heir to Winterfell, Robb Stark, was sparring with the master-at-arms, Ser Roderick Castle. Wooden swords clashed with dull thuds. Robb's movements were steady and powerful, methodical, showing a seriousness that went beyond his years. On the other side, Theon Greyjoy was practicing archery. His posture was dashing, and every arrow drew quiet cheers from the servants nearby. But his eyes kept drifting toward Robb, holding a trace of rivalry he couldn't quite hide. Sansa Stark was learning embroidery. Meanwhile, Arya Stark was making a total mess of hers. 1. Everything was full of life. A rough, resilient vitality unique to the North. Lynn paced over to Ser Roderick to watch the sparring match. Ser Roderick was an experienced teacher, always able to point out Robb's flaws instantly. It was no wonder he could train young men like Robb and Jon to be such skilled swordsmen. Seeing Lynn on the sidelines watching and learning, Ser Roderick didn't chase him away. Instead, he stopped what he was doing and waved him over. "Kid, you've been watching for a while. If you want to learn, come over. Why are you sneaking around?" It was the straightforward bluntness typical of the North. Lynn didn't stand on ceremony and walked right up. "Sir, I want to learn the great sword. Can you teach me?" 3. Ser Roderick looked surprised. He looked Lynn up and down, then stepped forward to squeeze his arms and shoulders before shaking his head. "With your build, a long sword fits you just fine, but you're a bit lacking for a two-handed great sword. Even if you could swing it, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to bring out its true power. Don't bite off more than you can chew, start with the basics." 2. Lynn had already mastered the one-handed sword and naturally had no interest in relearning it, so he insisted, "Sir, I still want to see your great sword technique." 5. Seeing Lynn so persistent, Roderick scratched his thick white beard in frustration. At that moment, Robb, leaning on his iron sword and panting, spoke up. "Sir Roderick, if he wants to learn, teach him a move or two. Let him hit a wall, and he'll settle down on his own." Since the young wolf had spoken, Sir Roderick didn't argue further. He took a heavy training greatsword from the weapon rack and threw it to Lynn. "Hold it steady." Clang. Lynn reached out with both hands to catch it but underestimated the weight of the thing. The greatsword nearly slipped from his grip, jarring his wrists until they went numb. Roderick showed a look of surprise. "Unexpectedly, you have some foundation. All right, I'll teach you. But at your current level, it's still a stretch." The sword felt cold and rough in his hands, its entire weight pressing down on Lynn's forearms. It felt less like holding a sword and more like shouldering an iron pillar. 1. Sir Roderick shook his head and easily took the great sword back from Lynn. Roderick had great strength. Lynn estimated he might have 8 points, which had to do with his burly physique. He handled the heavy weapon with ease. "Watch closely, kid. The essence of the great sword lies in brute force and momentum. Of course, you can't get fancy with this thing either." As soon as he finished speaking, Sir Roderick sank his weight slightly, twisted his waist, and his arms moved with the flow. The heavy blade sliced through the air, creating a dull, whistling roar. There were no flashy moves, just a simple horizontal sweep, but it carried an unstoppable momentum, as if it could split everything in front of it in two. Every swing needs the body's rotation. Use the waist to drive the shoulder, transfer that to the arm, and finally to the sword. You have some core strength in that frame of yours, but driving the sword is a struggle. You just end up being dragged around by the blade. Sir Roderick handed the sword back to Lynn. "Try it again." Lynn mimicked him, sinking his center of gravity and trying to twist his waist. But the sword was simply too heavy. Lynn copied Roderick's motion, but the swing came out soft and weak, lacking any momentum at all, more like he was swinging a wooden stake. Robb shook his head as he watched, but his eyes held no mockery, just a trace of curiosity. He actually managed to swing it. "Man, this kid has some tricks," he muttered to himself. If Lynn had a bit more strength, he might actually be able to use a great sword. Just as Lynn was trying desperately to feel the momentum Roderick described, a cold notification rang in his mind. Ding! Detected learnable skill: two-handed great sword learning condition, Strength greater than or equal to 7. Your current strength attribute is insufficient. Unable to master this skill. Lynn's movement froze. Not enough strength. Learning skills had conditions. It made sense, if he could just learn it and ignore physical limits in combat, the system would be too broken. Now wasn't the time. Roderick wasn't going anywhere. Lynn put down the greatsword and bowed seriously to Sir Roderick. Thank you for the guidance, Sir. Although he hadn't learned the skill, the effort gave him a new understanding of how to use strength. More importantly, he found a clear short-term goal. This kid might be overestimating himself, but his attitude is decent. Robb walked over, shouldering his sword, and patted Lynn's shoulder with a look of inquiry. How did it feel? Still want to learn? I wanted to learn it back then, too, but I ended up just like you. Robb was kind-hearted and didn't look down on Lynn for being a deserter, he was sincere and straightforward. Lynn grinned, showing his white teeth. Of course. If I get the chance, I'll definitely ask Sir Roderick for more pointers. Roderick nodded in agreement. Lynn seemed talented enough, and Roderick wasn't a stingy man. Kid, if you want to learn later, just come find me. As long as I have time, I'll teach you. But before you come back, you better train that body of yours properly. Just then, the rapid sound of hoofbeats shattered the peace of the courtyard. A messenger covered in snow rushed in through the castle gates. He stumbled as he dismounted, his face full of panic. Lord Stark. He ran toward Ned Stark, who was watching his son's train. Robb and Sir Roderick stopped their sparring. Theon lowered his longbow. Everyone's eyes focused on the messenger. Another caravan. The messenger's voice was low. But in the quiet courtyard, a few words drifted on the wind into Lynn's ears. White Knife River. Not a single survivor. 1. Ned Stark's face, originally calm, instantly frosted over. The air around him suddenly became heavy. This is a provocation against the North. Robb's young face was full of anger, his hand gripping the hilt of his wooden sword tight. Father, let me go. Just a bunch of rats hiding in the gutter. Theon Greyjoy walked over, a bloodthirsty excitement on his face. Leave it to me, my lord. I promise to hang their heads from the walls. Ned ignored them. He simply gave a brief order to the captain of his guard. Gather the men. Cleanse them. The captain bowed and turned to execute the order immediately. Ned then turned to Robb. Come with me. He was taking him to the council chamber. It was a clear signal. The young wolf of Winterfell was about to officially participate in his first military operation in the north. The group walked quickly toward the main keep. In the courtyard, only Lynn remained, guarded by the two soldiers. Lynn's heart began to beat powerfully. Not out of fear, but out of an unsuppressible desire. The Slayer system. To gain experience, he had to kill enemies. And now, enemies had appeared. They weren't nobles or soldiers, just a bunch of lawless bandits. Killing them wouldn't cause any trouble or invite retaliation from any house. They were perfect experience points. 1. This was his chance. The only chance to shed his prisoner status and truly master his own fate. When Ned, Robb, and the others walked out of the main keep with grim faces, Lynn moved. He took a step forward. The guards behind him immediately reached out to grab his shoulders. Halt! Let him speak. Ned Stark's voice rang out. He stopped and turned around. Those gray eyes were like deep pools, quietly watching Lynn. The guards released him. Lynn faced everyone's gaze, straightened his tattered black clothes, and bowed slightly. My lord. Lynn's voice wasn't loud, but it was incredibly clear. You gave me my life. For this kindness, I have no way to repay you. Theon Greyjoy let out a sneer. A deserter knows how to repay kindness. Lynn ignored him and just looked at Ned. Prophecy is words in the wind, time will eventually prove everything. But right now, loyalty needs to be proven with action. 1. Lynn turned his gaze to the gathering guards, to the sharp blades and cold armor. I heard bandits are ravaging your lands, slaughtering your people. They threaten the safety of the north and are enemies of the entire north. Lynn raised his head, looking straight into Ned Stark's eyes. I am not a knight, and I have no title. But before I wore the black, I fought men to survive. Please allow me to join the clearing party. Let me use the blood of these bandits to wash away my shame and prove my value. My life is yours to take back whenever you wish. But please, first let me fight for the north. 1. Silence fell over the courtyard. Everyone looked at Lynn with disbelief. A prisoner who had just been begging for his life on the execution block was now volunteering to face vicious bandits. Robb's face was full of surprise. Theon's mouth hung in a mocking smirk, as if looking at an arrogant madman. Maester Lewin stood behind Ned, his grey brows knit tight. Ned Stark didn't speak for a long time. He just looked at Lynn. He looked at his pale face, his tattered clothes, and those eyes that still burned with fire amidst the cold northern wind. This man was full of mysteries. Under the northern code of honor, his request actually sounded somewhat noble. Using enemy blood to wash away the shame of being a deserter. Proving loyalty with action. It was very northern. It was also very Stark. On what grounds? Ned finally spoke, his voice cold. Lynn answered quickly. If I die at the hands of bandits, you have one less burden. If I survive and kill the enemy, then I prove I am not a useless man who only speaks empty words. Ned's gaze lingered on his face for a long time. Long enough that Lynn could almost hear his own heart slamming against his chest. Hullen. Ned called the captain's name. Give him a sword. The captain paused for a moment but immediately bowed. Yes, my lord. Ned's gaze fell back on Lynn. You follow Robb's squad. Don't let me down. With that, Eddard Stark turned and strode away. In Lynn's vision, the blue panel seemed to glow a little brighter. 2. Name, Lynn. Strength, 5, average adult, 3, agility, 5, average adult, 3, constitution, 5, average adult, 3. After a night of rest, his body had fully recovered to its peak state. Even among veteran Night's Watchmen, these attributes were excellent, ranking above average. Killing some bandits who were just commoners, some of whom probably couldn't even hold a weapon properly, would be easy to accomplish. Chapter 7, Merging with the predecessor's combat memories. A plain, unadorned longsword was presented to Lynn. The hilt was wrapped in rough leather, and the crossguard was a simple crucifix shape without any superfluous decoration. It was a standard-issue guard's longsword, heavy, sturdy, and full of pragmatism. Lynn reached out, his fingertips grazing the cold hilt. In that instant, a strange warmth surged from his palm, rushing through his entire body. It felt as if something long dormant deep within his blood had suddenly awakened. Memory fragments that didn't belong to him came flooding back. This time, it wasn't the fear of the White Walkers. Instead, it was countless days and nights on the wall, swinging a sword against the biting wind and snow. It was the drag of the blade cutting through leather and flesh while fighting wildlings. It was Alistair Thorne's monotonous, harsh scolding ringing in his ears. Hold it steady. You useless waste. Your sword is your life. These instincts, carved into the bones of the original owner, thoroughly merged with Lynn's soul in this moment. Synchronizing original host's combat memories. Synchronization complete. Congratulations host, obtained new skill, one-handed sword, proficient, 18/100. Congratulations host, obtained new skill, horsemanship, beginner, 9/10. Congratulations host, obtained new skill, unarmed combat, proficient, 84/100. Lynn's eyes changed. If the fire burning in his eyes before was the will to survive, now, wrapped around that flame, was a layer of steel-like sharpness. Lynn tightened his grip, holding the hilt steady. The long sword in his hand no longer felt like a dead object, it felt like an extension of his own body. "Let's go." Robb Stark's voice drifted over. The young wolf had already mounted his warhorse. He glanced at Lynn, his eyes still holding a look of scrutiny. Lynn didn't say much. He simply and nimbly vaulted onto a spare garron. The party of 20 riders quickly rode out through the gates of Winterfell. The cold wind howled across the plains, and the group left a long trail of hoofprints on the snow-covered ground. Theon Greyjoy rode up beside Robb. He glanced back at Lynn, who was trailing at the rear, and a mocking smirk curled his lips. "Robb, do you actually trust this guy? A deserter who broke his vows to the Night's Watch, and now he's spouting nonsense about fighting for the North. Don't you find it laughable?" Robb stared straight ahead, his young face revealing little emotion. "Father told me to watch him. That's enough." Theon shrugged. "Fine. I just hope he doesn't drag us down. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind carrying out Lord Ned's justice a little early." 1. Their conversation wasn't loud, but carried by the wind, it still drifted intermittently into Lynn's ears. Lynn didn't care. He just silently focused on the weight of the sword in his hand and the strength slowly returning to his body. He knew that while words had power, steel and blood were what truly commanded respect. The group traveled east along a tributary of the White Knife. The scent of blood in the air grew thicker the deeper they went. Finally, at the edge of a burnt-out woodland, they found the wreckage of the ambushed caravan. Several wagons were overturned, cargo scattered everywhere. The ground was stained a mottled blackish red by snow and congealed blood. Several corpses lay stiff in the snow, the terror of their final moments frozen on their faces. Crows circled above the bodies, letting out hoarse cries. "They haven't been gone long," a veteran soldier said to Robb after examining the rutted tracks. "Half a day, at most." Robb's face was gloomy. He tightened his grip on his sword hilt. "After them." The party set off again, hooves thudding dully against the blood-soaked snow. They chased for several more miles. Ahead, in a sparse patch of woods, came the faint crackle of a bonfire and the sound of coarse, rowdy laughter. Robb raised his hand, signaling the column to halt. Everyone immediately dismounted, moving silently. "Hullen, take 5 men and flank from the left," Robb lowered his voice, calmly assigning tasks. "Theon, your archery is good. Find the high ground and cover us. The rest of you, with me." He looked at Lynn last. "You. Stick close to me. Don't run off." It was both an order and a warning. Lynn nodded and drew the long sword at his waist. The blade left the scabbard with a clear hum. The cold edge reflected the calm in Lynn's eyes. He had already made up his mind. If he wanted to live a better life, he had to kill. The group quietly crept into the woods, pushing aside the last brush blocking their view. In a clearing not far ahead, a dozen ragged bandits were gathered around a bonfire, tearing into roast meat and guzzling stolen ale. Their weapons were tossed carelessly aside, their faces full of the indulgence and smugness that comes after looting. A fierce look flashed through Robb's eyes. He raised his sword high. For the North. The roar was like a thunderclap on a clear day. Robb was the first to charge out, with the Stark guards close behind, shouting battle cries that shook the sky. The bandits were instantly thrown into chaos, panicking as they scrambled for their weapons. Some even coughed violently, choking on their ale. Theon's arrow whistled through the air at that exact moment, accurately piercing a bandit's neck. The battle erupted instantly. Lynn's breathing was steady, his heart beating powerfully in his chest. He didn't roar like the others, he simply focused his entire mind on the chaotic battlefield before him. These bandits were just commoners holding weapons. One bandit noticed Lynn. He was a large man with a face full of fleshy ridges. Seeing Lynn's tattered black clothes and pale face, a look of contempt flashed in his eyes. A soft target. Grinning savagely, he raised a hand axe and chopped down viciously at Lynn's head. The wind howled. Lynn's body reacted faster than his brain. He sidestepped, dodging the axe blade. Now, Lynn didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward, sinking his center of gravity. The long sword in his hand stabbed upward from a tricky angle. The one-handed sword skill was now Lynn's instinct. No flashy moves, just the simplest, most lethal thrust. Thwack. A soft sound. The tip of the sword accurately pierced the man's throat. The savage grin on the bandit's face froze instantly, the contempt in his eyes turning into extreme terror. He tried to make a sound, but his throat only produced a leaking, gurgling noise. Blood gushed down the blade, the warm sensation coating Lynn's hand. Enemy killed, 1 experience +1. Lynn didn't feel the slightest discomfort, instead, he found it stimulating. Without pausing, he yanked the long sword out. Warm blood sprayed, and the large bandit crashed to the ground like a felled log. It all happened in a flash. The surrounding battle cries seemed to fade away. Lynn wiped his hand, slippery with blood, on his clothes. In this moment, his eyes saw only life and death. 2 more bandits realized their companion had been killed and roared, flanking Lynn from the left and right. A scimitar and a wooden club, carrying a foul wind, sealed off all of Lynn's escape routes. Lynn took a deep breath. His footwork shifted, his body twisting to avoid the deadly scimitar. At the same time, he parried outward with his sword. Lynn accurately blocked the wooden club smashing toward his head. With a flip of his wrist, his long sword slid down the length of the club. The wooden club had no crossguard. Arg! A miserable scream rang out as the club-wielding bandit's fingers were sliced clean off by Lynn. The club dropped to the ground. Blood sprayed wildly. Before the other bandit could react, Lynn was already upon him. His movements had no wasted motion, a clean, sharp horizontal slash cut through the air. The bandit's eyes only had time to reflect the flash of snow-bright steel. The next moment, his world spun upside down. Enemy killed, 1 experience +1. Enemy killed, 1 experience +1. Lynn followed up with a backhand thrust, piercing the heart of the bandit with the severed hand, ending his misery. In just a few breaths, Lynn had killed 3 men in a row. He stood there, sword in hand. At this moment, Lynn was splattered with warm, fresh blood. The surrounding bandits were stunned by his clean, brutal efficiency. They instinctively took a step back, looking at Lynn with eyes full of fear. Not far away, Robb Stark, who had just cut down an enemy, saw the whole thing. His young face was written with shock. This deserter actually killed 3 enemies that quickly. Chapter 8, Earning Respect. That deserter? No. He is no deserter. 1. The thought flashed through Robb Stark's mind. A deserter wouldn't have eyes like that. He was a true warrior. Lynn's chest heaved violently with rapid breaths, but his sword hand remained rock steady. A bearded bandit leader let out a beastly roar, shattering the brief silence. What the fuck are you scared of? They're on horses, we can't outrun them. Fight them. Get in there. Kill at least 1 before you die. Fear was replaced by a more primal ferocity, and the remaining bandits surged forward again. Some of them had noticed it, too. The man in black seemed more threatening, a tough nut to crack, but the continuous killing had pushed him to his limit. If 2 men surrounded him, no matter how strong he was, he wouldn't last long against 4 hands. Robb saw through the bandits' intent and roared, trying to lead his men closer to Lynn. Stop them. Seeing Robb issuing orders, another group of bandits instantly realized who the leader was. They turned and attacked Robb and his men from the flank with reckless abandon, forcing Robb to engage them. Lynn's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected to draw so much attention. Then again, killing 3 men in quick succession made it hard not to be noticed. Lynn backed up against a thick pine tree. This way, he only had to face enemies from the front and sides. Robb and the others were drawing most of the bandits' attention, which greatly reduced the pressure on Lynn. A bandit charged first, his poleaxe whistling as he chopped down at Lynn's head. Lynn didn't block it directly. He slid his feet, pressing his body against the tree trunk, dodging the axe blade by a hair's breadth. Wood chips flew. The axe bit deep into the trunk. This is the opening. Lynn flipped his wrist, driving his long sword upward. The tip of the sword cleanly sliced open the bandit's unprotected throat. Blood sprayed out, leaving a shocking streak of red on the gray-white bark. Enemy killed, 1 experience plus 1. Before the body could even fall, another bandit's scimitar swept in, aiming straight for Lynn's waist. Lynn twisted his waist and swung his sword to parry. Clang! Metal clashed against metal, sending sparks flying. Just as he blocked, a bandit suddenly appeared from the side and lunged. He had no proper weapon, just a sharpened wooden stake, but he stabbed viciously at Lynn's ribs. There was no room to retreat. It was a matter of life and death. Thwip! A stray arrow cut through the air, accurately nailing the stake-wielding bandit through the eye socket. His scream cut off abruptly. The bandit's body stiffened for a second, then slumped softly to the ground. Lynn's attention had been drawn to the ambusher, and the bandit whose scimitar he had just parried grinned savagely, raising his blade again. The blade flashed. Lynn tried his best to dodge, but could only manage to turn his body sideways. A tearing pain erupted from his left shoulder. Clothes were sliced open, flesh curled back, and blood instantly stained half his body red. Lynn grunted, stumbling. The intense pain stimulated his nerves but didn't make him lose his reason. Instead, it ignited a ferocity deep in his bones. He didn't retreat. Using the momentum of his stumble, he slammed forward, driving his shoulder hard into the bandit's chest. The bandit hadn't expected him to be so bold after being wounded. Caught off guard, he was knocked back several steps. Lynn's sword moved. A simple, direct upward slash. Rip! With no iron armor for protection, the sword edge sliced from the bandit's lower abdomen all the way up, splitting his chest open. Entrails mixed with blood spilled onto the ground. The savage grin froze on the bandit's face. He looked down at his empty abdominal cavity, his eyes filled with disbelief and despair. Enemy killed, 1 experience plus 1. 1. Seeing that he was wounded, Lynn stopped pushing himself and moved toward the edge of the battlefield. Roar! Robb Stark's battle cry rang out. The young Robb was seeing red. He had completely ignited the wolf blood within him. He no longer stuck to the rigid swordsmanship taught by the master-at-arms. Though young, every swing was full of power, wide, sweeping strikes carrying the unique wildness of the north. One bandit had his arm severed by Robb's sword, falling to the ground screaming. Another was cleaved down, shield and all. Because of the explosive performance of Lynn and Robb, the tide of battle began to turn rapidly. The bandit leader saw this, his eyes nearly popping with rage. He abandoned his fight with the Stark guards and made to flee. But in doing so, he ran right into Lynn, who was also trying to maneuver to the outside. Seeing Lynn was wounded, the bandit leader roared and swung a blood-stained two-handed great axe, charging straight at him. Before he even arrived, a thick stench of blood and sweat hit Lynn's face. The axe blade whipped up a foul wind as it crashed down. Lynn didn't dodge. He was exhausted, he couldn't escape the reach of a polearm no matter how he tried. He bent his knees slightly, sank his center of gravity, and held his longsword horizontally in front of him. 4. Clang. A loud bang. Lynn blocked with the thickest part of the blade, deflecting the lethal axe to his side. The massive impact shook his arms violently. The wound on his shoulder tore open again, pain blacking out his vision for a moment. Surprise flashed in the bandit leader's eyes, quickly replaced by cruelty. He bore down on the axe, intending to crush this stubborn opponent completely. But Lynn had achieved his goal. He used that block to buy a chance to get in close. Lynn suddenly released his left hand from the hilt and spun his body to the right. His right elbow, like a cannonball leaving the barrel, slammed viciously into the bandit leader's ribs. Crack! The crisp sound of shattering bone. The bandit leader let out a pained grunt, his massive body stiffening for a split second from the agony. At the same time, Robb, unwilling to let the leader escape, arrived and thrust his longsword forward. The longsword sank into the hilt, accurately piercing the bandit leader's chest. Afraid Robb would steal the kill, Lynn quickly picked up a longsword from the ground and stabbed it through the bandit's eye socket. Enemy leader killed, 1 experience plus 2. The fierce light in the bandit leader's eyes faded rapidly. Lynn yanked the sword out. The massive bandit was dead. It actually gave 2 points of experience. It seems the stronger the opponent, the more experience given. But he must not have been that strong, or he wouldn't have just given 2 points. Then, if I kill a strong man like Jaime Lannister, or a White Walker, or even the Night King, how much experience would I get? Of course, I could also choose to massacre civilians to farm experience. But if I did that without backing or someone to cover for me, there probably wouldn't be a place for me in all of Westeros. With the death of their leader, the remaining bandits collapsed completely. They dropped their weapons and fled, screaming. They were met by the cold steel of the Stark guards and Theon's deadly arrows. The battle was over. Silence returned to the woods, save for the crackling of the bonfire and the groans of wounded soldiers. Lynn leaned against the scarred pine tree and slowly slid to the ground. The longsword fell into the snow with a clang. He was shaking all over. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. His shoulder wound was still bleeding, and his ribs throbbed with piercing pain from the impact. Every breath pulled at his injuries, making him nearly faint. His vision began to blur. A pair of boots stained with mud and snow stopped in front of him. Lynn lifted his head with effort. It was Robb Stark. The young wolf's face still held the lingering killing intent, but his blue eyes were filled with complex emotions, shock, confusion, and a trace of respect. You. Robb opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. He looked at the corpses around Lynn, then at Lynn's gruesome wounds. Any words seemed pale and powerless in this moment. Hullen. Robb turned and shouted at a guard. Get over here. Bandage him. Theon Greyjoy walked over as well. He put away his longbow and crouched down. Looking at the bone-deep wound on Lynn's shoulder, the mockery from before was gone. With his wounds and blood, Lynn had won the recognition of Robb and Theon. In his vision, the blue panel visible only to him floated quietly. Experience, 7. Chapter 9, Return to Winterfell. The bloody scent in the woods was thinned somewhat by the biting wind. The bonfire still crackled, its light reflecting on the faces of the survivors. Guards were clearing the battlefield, piling bandit corpses together while tending to their injured comrades. Hullen ran over with a medical kit. He tore open the blood-soaked clothes on Lynn's left shoulder. The wound was deep enough to expose bone, with flesh curled back looking particularly gruesome under the dim firelight. Hullen worked quickly, first flushing the wound with strong spirits. The piercing pain made Lynn's body tremble violently, he clenched his teeth, cold sweat beading on his forehead. Theon Greyjoy walked over, putting away his usual frivolous demeanor. He looked at Lynn's pale face, then at the miserable corpses of the bandits around him. Didn't expect a runaway crow to have such sharp claws, Theon said. The mockery in his tone had faded significantly, replaced by a scrutiny mixed with surprise. Lynn didn't have the strength to respond. His entire focus was on the blue panel visible only to him. Host, Lynn. Strength, 3, injured/weakened. Agility, 3, injured/weakened. Constitution, 3, injured/weakened. Skills, one-handed sword, proficient, 18/100, horsemanship, beginner, 9/10, unarmed combat, proficient, 84/100. Experience, 7. The number 7 was the best reward for the life and death struggle Lynn had just endured. But the 3 bright red weakened statuses on the panel were a constant reminder of his body's terrible condition. The agonizing pain from his wounds and physical exhaustion made Lynn's consciousness swim. He needed to return to Winterfell and get treatment from Maester Lewin as soon as possible. Experience points should prioritize attribute upgrades, Lynn thought. 3 points of strength is just average. If I can use experience to boost it directly, I'll be invincible in no time. Put it all into Constitution. Note, attribute points cannot be increased via experience. Experience is limited to upgrading learned skills. There are various ways to increase attribute points, please explore on your own. Right, if I could just pump stats with XP, I'd be Superman in a few days. Lynn had thought he found a loophole, but testing it proved it didn't work. Since that's the case, I'll just honestly upgrade my skills. Lynn's gaze fell on the horsemanship, beginner, 9/10 line. The road back was long. With his current physical condition, just the jolting on horseback would be enough to aggravate his injuries. Without hesitation, Lynn mentally commanded, System, add 1 experience point to horsemanship. Experience -1. Horsemanship 9/10 rightward arrow 10/10. Level up. Congratulations host, horsemanship upgraded to, proficient, 0/100. 4. A warm current suddenly flowed through Lynn's limbs. It wasn't the warmth of physical recovery, but a more profound sensation. Fragments of memory regarding horse riding flooded his mind, how to maintain balance, how to control the horse's turning with subtle leg pressure, how to sense the horse's mood. These skills felt innate, as if he had practiced them thousands of times until they were etched into his bones. Done, Holland said steadily as he tied off the clean linen bandage. Didn't hit the bone. You're lucky, otherwise you'd really be suffering. Lynn nodded and, with the help of a guard, swayed as he stood up. Robb led Lynn's Garen over. Can you still ride? The young wolf looked at Lynn. In his blue eyes, there was no longer just scrutiny, but a trace of concern. Lynn nodded. He didn't speak, just took a deep breath, endured the sharp pain, and mounted the horse. This movement was much cleaner than when he had arrived. As soon as he sat in the saddle, that marvelous feeling returned. He could clearly feel every muscle tremor of the horse beneath him and sense its slight unease from the smell of blood. Lynn instinctively squeezed the horse's belly lightly with his legs and gave the reins a subtle shake. The previously anxious Garen miraculously quieted down and let out a gentle snort. Surprise flashed through Robb's eyes, but he didn't ask further. Let's head back. The party regrouped and set off for Winterfell. This time, Lynn wasn't at the tail end. He rode beside Robb and Theon. It was a silent signal. Lynn had the highest kill count and had earned the right to ride at the front. Westeros respected martial prowess. Lynn had won their respect with sword and blood. The night wind of the north was biting cold. Hooves crunched on the snow. Lynn's body rose and fell rhythmically with the horse. The improvement in his horsemanship allowed him to adapt to the bumps in the most energy-efficient way, relaxing his tense muscles and easing the pain in his shoulder. What did you do before? Robb asked suddenly, breaking the silence. His gaze fell on Lynn's blood-stained long sword. Lynn's swordsmanship had neither the elegance of a knight nor the structure of a master-at-arms. But every move was simple, direct, and lethal techniques purely for killing enemies in the shortest time possible. It was indeed the style of the Night's Watch, very similar to his uncle Benyen's way. Before I wore the black, I was just a common man trying to survive, Lynn said, staring ahead, his voice slightly blurred by the wind. I committed some crimes, so I joined the watch. 4. Nowadays, the Night's Watch had long lost its former glory, most members were criminals, and going to the wall was essentially exile. To survive, you have to learn something, Lynn added. The answer was ambiguous but reasonable. Robb didn't press further. He silently picked up the pace. On the distant horizon, the massive grey silhouette of Winterfell became clear under the starlight. When the party passed through the castle gates, torches were already blazing in the courtyard. Ned Stark stood on the steps of the main keep, Maester Lewin behind him with a lantern. His face was as calm and majestic as the northern night sky. His gaze swept over the party, over the bandit heads tied to the saddles, and over the wounded guards. Finally, his eyes stopped on Lynn. The deserter, half his body stained red with blood, was sitting quietly on his horse, riding side by side with his eldest son. Robb dismounted and walked quickly to his father, kneeling on one knee. "Father, the bandits have been completely cleared." Ned nodded, helped his son up, and patted his shoulder. Though young, his eldest son could already share his burdens, which relieved him greatly. "You did well." Ned looked past Robb to Lynn again. He fought bravely, father," Robb interjected, a trace of youthful excitement in his tone. "He killed 6 bandits and protected our flank multiple times. He proved his loyalty with action." The courtyard fell silent. All the guards looked at the young man still on his horse with complex expressions. Ned Stark didn't speak. He just looked at Lynn, emotions churning in his grey eyes, suspicion, scrutiny, and a trace of imperceptible recognition. Clearly, a cowardly deserter wouldn't fight with such disregard for death. He believed Lynn's story about the White Walkers a little more now. After a long time, Ned finally spoke. "Maester Lewin. Take him for treatment." "Yes, my lord." Lewin walked down the steps with his lantern to Lynn's horse. Lynn dismounted, stumbling slightly. After being tense for so long, arriving at a safe place let the weakness and exhaustion wash over him instantly. Lynn handed the longsword back to a nearby guard, but Ned stopped him. "No need to return it. Keep the sword, you've earned it." As he followed Maester Lewin across the courtyard, Lynn could feel the gaze of the Warden of the North lingering on his back. He knew that from tonight on, he was no longer the prisoner who could be beheaded at any moment. He had survived. But the crisis wasn't over yet. Lynn, Ned, and Maester Lewin were all waiting for the Raven. Chapter 10, Prophecy Fulfilled. In Maester Lewin's chamber, the scent of herbs and old parchment mingled in the air. Lynn lay shirtless on the hard wooden bed. He could clearly feel the cooling sensation of the ointment suppressing the burning pain of his torn flesh. "You have a good constitution," Maester Lewin said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "The injury is less severe than I anticipated." He rebandaged Lynn with clean linen, his movements practiced and skilled, like he was treating a fine piece of parchment. "Who taught you swordsmanship?" the Maester asked, seemingly casual. "The master-at-arms of the Night's Watch, Alistair Thorne," Lynn replied, his face buried in the pillow, voice muffled. "He only teaches how to stick a sword into someone's body the fastest way possible, nothing else." The answer made Maester Lewin pause. His grey eyes swept over the crisscrossing old scars on Lynn's body. Those weren't wounds from fleeing, they were badges of honor earned from countless life-and-death battles with wildlings on the wall. A cowardly deserter wouldn't have such things on his back. "Rest well," Lewin said, packing his medical kit and turning to leave. Lord Stark has ordered that you may stay here until your wounds heal. The door was pulled shut gently, not locked. Lynn knew this was a signal from Ned Stark. He was no longer a prisoner, but a special subject under observation. Lynn exhaled a long breath. Now, he didn't need to think about anything. Just heal. And wait. Wait for the Raven from King's Landing to stamp the final seal of truth on all his prophecies. The next day, Lynn was allowed to walk freely within the castle, though 2 guards always followed him at a distance. It was less protection and more surveillance. He avoided the courtyard where Robb and Theon were sparring. The clanging noise made him irritable. Instead, he found a quiet corner, leaned against the cold stone wall, and soaked in the meager sunlight of the north. He closed his eyes, replaying the fight with the bandits in his mind over and over. The angle of every swing, the timing of every dodge, the sensation of blood spraying. These experiences, bought with his life, were the foundation of his survival. A light, deliberately quiet set of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Lynn opened his eyes. A small figure stood before him, blocking the precious beam of sunlight. It was Arya Stark, the youngest daughter of the Lord of Winterfell. She stood with her hands behind her back, wearing a dusty grey boy's tunic. Her hair was a mess like a bird's nest, and her face had specks of mud, but those grey Stark eyes were astonishingly bright. She looked completely different from the show, even though she was small and thin. The spirit in her eyes gave her a wild beauty. "They say you can fight," Arya said, her voice crisp and carrying the straightforwardness of a northerner. Lynn didn't speak, just looked at her. Arya stepped closer, her small fists clenched tight. "The Night's Watch swordsmanship is completely different from what Ser Roderick teaches. Ser Roderick says fencing should be elegant, like a dance." She pouted, clearly disagreeing. "But your sword isn't. Your sword is fast, direct." She seemed to be searching for a word to describe it. The corner of Lynn's mouth twitched up uncontrollably. "This little girl is a born she-wolf. You want to learn?" Arya's eyes lit up instantly, like 2 flames igniting in the dark. She nodded vigorously, her expression incredibly serious. "Teach me." The little girl's voice held a trace of pleading. "Please." Lynn looked at her, at those eyes full of desire. A chance to build a deeper connection with the Stark family had been delivered right to him. And it was with Ned Stark's favorite daughter. "All right, I can teach you," Lynn said, slowly standing up and rolling his stiff shoulders. "But this is an exchange. You have to teach me something, too." Arya paused, clearly not expecting this request. She tilted her head and thought, "But I don't know anything." "You do," Lynn smiled. "Like, which secret passages in the castle no one knows about? Which kitchen steward hides the ale? How to sneak into the Godswood without being caught?" Arya's mouth slowly formed an O shape. She hadn't expected her daily mischief could be used as tuition fees. 3. "I agree." She accepted without hesitation. "Deal. But not now, wait until I'm healed. And this must be kept secret from everyone. Come." Arya extended a dirty little fist. Lynn paused, then extended his own fist to gently bump hers. A simple pact was made. Just then, the urgent sound of bells exploded over the castle. Clang! 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 The sound from the Maestus Tower was heavy and distant. A raven had arrived. The smile on Lynn's face vanished instantly. He looked up at the towering grey turret. What was bound to happen had finally come. Arya heard the bells too. She glanced at the tower in confusion but quickly turned her attention back to Lynn. "It's a promise. I'll come find you tonight." Arya finished speaking and skipped away like a happy little deer. Lynn didn't move. He stood quietly, feeling the change in the castle. The guards' footsteps became hurried, and the servants' whispers hushed. An invisible tension spread rapidly through the air. The storm was coming. In the study of the main keep, the fire in the hearth burned brightly, crackling. But the atmosphere in the room was colder than the ice and snow outside. Ned Stark stood by the window, looking at the grey sky. In his hand, he held a small piece of parchment. The edge of the paper still bore the wax seal of a raven's message scroll. Catelyn Tully, his wife, stood behind him. Her face was filled with unconcealed worry and grief. "Jon. He's dead," Catelyn said, her voice trembling. Her sister, Lisa Arryn, was now a widow. The relationship between the families was tangled. Lisa was old Jon Arryn's wife and Catelyn's sister, while Ned was Jon Arryn's foster son. Ned didn't turn around. He remained silent, like a stone statue. "The letter says it was a sudden illness, a fever," Catelyn continued, her hands wringing her sleeves tightly. "But in the other letter Lisa secretly sent, she says." Catelyn paused, seemingly afraid to say the terrible word. "It was murder. The Lannisters did it?" The study fell into a deathly silence. Only the wood in the fireplace let out a final groan. Ned slowly turned around. His face was expressionless, but a storm raged in his grey eyes. Lynn's words echoed madly in his mind like a curse. "The hand of the king, Lord Jon Arryn. He is dead. He was murdered." Word for word. The prophecy had become reality. "Robert, the king, is on his way north," Catelyn said, her voice full of unease. "He is coming to Winterfell. He wants to ask you to go south, to take Jon's place as the new hand of the king." Ned closed his eyes. "And that is the beginning of all tragedy." Lynn's words rang in his ears. It filled Ned with a bone-deep chill that rose from the soles of his feet and instantly spread through his limbs. It was colder than the bitterest wind of the north.